in terms of mental health, I spent years without that proper support, and I really regret that. Who knows what my life, my family, my business would have looked like if I had gotten to that sooner.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hi, friends. It's Danielle. And you may or may not have noticed that I took a week or two off from episodes, and that was just when I was launching twice-a-week episodes, and then I fell off the face of the earth. And I am coming from a very honest place of saying I got overwhelmed. And I'm sure you can relate. It is 2020, and there's kind of a lot going on. But I also started working with a business coach in a group setting, and I am really energized to completely kind of reform and streamline my services so I can even better support families and come alongside you wholeheartedly. And in that, I do not have time to keep up with editing. And you know how much I hope it comes off that you know how much I love interviewing and finding these amazing guests and being able to share these stories with you. But I do not love the editing side of it. And I'm very vocal about that on my Instagram stories when I am editing, because it is genuinely painful for me. My personality is one of a coach that is one-on-one, talking and problem solving and sharing what I love to talk about. It is not anything working with spreadsheets, numbers, technology, any of this stuff. So I would love to continue to produce episodes. However, I'm just going to throw out a disclaimer now that I can't guarantee the consistency going forward. And I know that there will be a break at some point over the winter or holiday season, because I want to spend that time with my family, and I want to feel like I can focus on the things that are really moving me forward. And I would love to continue the podcast, especially if I can get to a place where I can outsource some of the editing, and I'm just not at that place yet. So I'm just going to have to do what I can, and that's going to be enough. So I'm going to take some of my own medicine and give myself grace, and know that hopefully you're going to do the same. So I am so glad that you're here today. We are real talking for a second here before I dive into this episode. And I actually just recorded this episode this week, and usually I have about 2 months worth of episodes already recorded that I pull from to edit. And this one I expedited to the top because I realized that November is National Adoption Month, and this was such an amazing perspective to share that it was the thing that got me to edit it. So here we are, and I'm very, very excited for you to hear it today. It's an interview with a birth mom sharing her story of how she came to the place of deciding to put her daughter up for adoption, what that process looked like for her. And I think it is a very needed perspective to understand what it was like to be in her shoes. So before I get to that, I will go through some business. If you haven't left a review for the podcast, please do. I haven't gotten any reviews in for like the last month because I haven't been promoting it. But if you are benefiting and enjoying the podcast, please, on whatever podcast platform you are on, take the time before we jump in to just leave a super quick review. That is the thing that helps share the podcast with more listeners. And I really hope that you are taking care of yourself right now. I hope that you're giving yourself grace. I hope that you're putting on screen time if you need. I hope that you are treating yourself well, getting some sleep, doing little things that bring you joy, and knowing that it's okay. And it's actually what's most important right now. Because, like I say in every episode, in order for you to be the mom that your kids need, they need you whole. And right now, things are crazy. So I hope that even if you turn this off right now, you know that you're doing the best you can with what you have. And when you give yourself that grace, you can extend it to everyone else in your life. So that's one of the messages that we're going to hear from Leanna in this episode, but I will go ahead and introduce her so that you can hear it from her yourself. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Leanna Lee. Leanna is a freelance writer, journalist, podcaster, and speaker and founder of content marketing brand Lost Lass. Leanna writes about the future of work, tech, and finance for companies and publications around the world. She also speaks about her mental health experiences as a disabled writer and birth mother. She's passionate about ethical journalism, long-term mental health management, and sustainable freelance businesses, something that she's still learning to build herself. Her podcast, MXV, co-hosted with international mental health speaker Mike Venny, offers wellness and business support for freelancers, remote workers, and business owners who struggle with mental health. Welcome, Leanna. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to dive into your story because you have a passionate viewpoint on things that we need to talk more about. And not only is it the need for prioritizing mental health, but also your experience as being a birth mom as well. Mm-hmm. So let's start with like the runway of before motherhood ever was in the picture. What is your backstory? What do we need to know about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very international family. My mom was an immigrant from Southern Africa and sort of from Britain via Southern Africa. Her family had been missionaries there for several generations. So I grew up kind of bopping between continents. And I had this I grew up with this travel bug. I also grew up with this desire to live and work very independently, which is kind of why I'm a freelancer today. We also grew up my sisters and I grew up in a conservative Christian family. So there wasn't a lot of, I'd say, comprehensive sex education. There wasn't really a great framework about what would happen if you were unexpectedly to find yourself in the situation that I did, even when it came to being in a serious relationship. So that was, I feel like, that was something that I'm still working through today from a mental health perspective, and then also just kind of relationally as well. So I was born in the U.S., moved up to Chicago when I was about 6, and I've lived in the area ever since. I became a writer in college and started freelancing, and then I actually didn't start my business until right after I had my daughter, which is kind of its own interesting story as one of the a promise, shall we say, that I made to myself. So, but before all that happened, I met a very good-looking Asian American guy. We had actually known each other in college, and we'd reconnected through mutual friends. And I had just come back from the UK on a 2-3 month solo trip, and I loved it. I actually just wanted to go back on a one-way ticket. I was just going to find a remote island, become a journalist, and just stay there. And I came back into the middle of a really, really difficult, dysfunctional family situation. My parents were separating at the time, and there was just a lot of stuff going on. Really rough history of mental health and abuse in my family, and it kind of reached a head kind of when I came back from the UK. It was like late 2014, and I had still been living at home like right up until then, and then my sisters and I left our home. And so we stayed in hotels and with friends for a while until we sorted things out. And it was just we didn't know what to do next. We were all trying to find jobs, trying to find places to live. And it was just very, very chaotic. And in the middle of all this, I met this good-looking Asian American guy and reconnected with him. And he was kind of a breath of fresh air in the middle of all of this. But at the same time, I was thinking, no, I can't commit to anything. I'm going to be a journalist in Scotland. Like, I can't, I don't have time for this. I'm leaving. But he changed my mind a little bit. And 5-6 months later, we found out we were pregnant. At the time, I was working part-time in a manual labor job. I was trying to figure out what the heck to do about writing, and should I continue freelancing, what's going on with family and new relationship and all of that. And then came the pregnancy, just kind of extra bombshell on top of that. So
wow. Yeah.
A lot happening.
Talk about unexpected.
Yep.
That's a lot. That's a lot to be managing. Oh my goodness. So how did you deal?
Well, I was sitting in my car. It was a hot July day, and I just had this like horrible, horrible feeling come over me. I don't know what it was exactly, but it had suddenly occurred to me that it'd been a long while since my last period. And I was like, what is it? Stress? Is it? And then I just I could feel the terror rising. And I told my boss, who was a good friend of mine at the time, and I told her I needed to leave early to figure this out. And I talked to my boyfriend, got a test. The first one was positive, and I was like, okay, well, sometimes that happens. You have to do a second one the day after, right? Grasping at straws here. The second one the day after, still positive, and so. I didn't have health insurance. He didn't have health insurance. We weren't really sure what came next because, we had been used to having this, at least some kind of support system with our families. And so we ended up at this Catholic clinic that offered free pregnancy tests and scans just to confirm in case you got insurance or had insurance, they could provide that confirmation for you to get treatment. So I was going to apply for government health insurance, but we needed that confirmation. So we got that, and we were just kind of standing there in the parking lot like, I don't know how to feel about this, because on the one hand is this beautiful, glorious, amazing feeling, and on the other hand it's just complete terror. I mean, what comes next? I was still getting to know this man. I had absolutely no support from my family. They had a bunch of their own shit to deal with, and it was like time standing still. And I can still remember the day that my boyfriend came over. We were living separately at the time. And he said, I can't do this. I think we need to consider adoption. And I honestly, in that instant, I probably could have killed him. Was just, it had never really occurred to me because I grew up in a conservative family. It was sort of a all or nothing kind of thing. Either you got an abortion, which wasn't really acceptable in my community, or you kind of sucked it up and you got engaged and you got married and you raised the kid. And it didn't occur to me, I was working myself up to accepting the situation and saying, okay, well, I guess we need to get engaged before we tell my parents. But it didn't everything just stopped when he said that, and I was just livid. I didn't talk to him for like 3 days, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anyone who'd ever been in this situation before. Mm-hmm. I knew people who had kind of, I guess, unexpected pregnancies, but most of them had either broken up and they'd figured out some kind of single parent situation, or they'd gotten married. I didn't know anyone in my position. So long story short, it just eventually I realized that he was right. And although it took me a while to like work through some resentment, to this day, I'm grateful that he was the one. I mean, can you imagine the amount of courage and just sadness and anger and fear, but so much courage it takes to bring up that kind of choice?
Yeah, that's
to someone you love. Like, mm-hmm. I'm so sorry that he had to be the one. And it wasn't like an objective third party who would say, you know what, right, given your situation, this is what you could consider. No, it was him who had to say it. And it was, that was really hard. It took me a while to appreciate that, but it was,
I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, at that point we ended up, the Catholic clinic we knew we had gone through had given us a bunch of materials, and one of the agencies they had suggested was Bethany Christian Services, which is the one that we went through. And we weren't, at the time, I don't think we were really thinking about who the adoptive parents would be. It was just kind of trying to take in the magnanimity of this choice. Mm-hmm. But later we thought, okay, it would be great if our daughter could be brought up in the same faith that we're used to. He's Catholic and I'm Protestant, but kind of the overall Christian faith. And that ended up working out really well for us. So we did, we found a fantastic family, but, before all that happened, there was a good 7 months of just skyrocketing back and forth and roller coaster and, trying to enjoy this pregnancy and telling our parents. My parents were appalled. And I was, I can still remember my dad saying, if you had been going to a Christian, our church that I wasn't currently going to, then you would have been disciplined in the church for this, because that's part of the community and it's just not really that acceptable. And his mom disowned him for a week.
Oh my goodness.
And in all fairness, she came around and she ended up being the most supportive parent. She was fantastic, but she was a bit upset there for a bit. But yeah, it was.
How old were you guys at this time?
Older than you would think. It's funny how adoption, you get these kind of preconceived notions of 16-year-olds kind of getting pregnant in high school. But no, this was 2015. I was 25 and he was 25. So, adult age, old enough theoretically to get married and to kind of figure this parenting thing out. But at the time, in 2012, I had been attacked in college and I developed kind of severe PTSD symptoms from that. I'd also been dealing with suicidal depression and anxiety from kind of a combination of the family situation I dealt with growing up and then college and PTSD as well. So by the time we had gotten to the pregnancy part of my life, I needed some serious mental health support, and I just had not gotten it. As I said, there was a long history of that in my family. Both my mother and my grandmother on my mother's side have severe PTSD, untreated PTSD from war, from abuse, from assault, and just there was no precedence in my family for handling mental health situations. It was very much a pray about it, give it to God, accept what you're dealing with because it's what you're meant to be dealing with. I'm not sure how that lines up with not getting mental health support. No one's ever been able to give me a good answer to that. But that's what it was. And so not to say that it was all on them, because that really was my responsibility. But that was kind of the environment I went back to after college, after being attacked. And, by the time we got to being 25 and pregnant, it was so clear, even though I was so upset and resentful of my boyfriend bringing up adoption. And even though I was, I was kind of overjoyed at the fact of having something that was just mine, like my own family that I could choose and that I'd help create. And there's something really amazing and special about that. And doubly so if you struggled to like the family that you were born into. There's something really beautiful about that. But that didn't mean that I could be the parent that my daughter needed.
Yeah. How did you realize that?
I think the moment came. It was creeping up on me throughout the whole pregnancy. Like at this point, we had basically already made the choice, practically speaking. But my head and my heart were a little bit farther behind.
I can imagine.
But I think the moment really came when I was invited to a friend's baby shower. And I was trying to find her a gift. And I ended up at Barnes and Noble's looking for just something. I think I was looking at journals or something like that. And I came upon the baby's first year journal. And I just couldn't stop staring at it. It was, you open it up and you see all the milestones and her first laugh and her first word and her first everything. And, excuse me. And I couldn't even complete the thought here. I couldn't just take in the magnanimity of that choice right then. It was overwhelming. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. So I left, I got in the car, I just started ugly crying, just sobbing. And the thing I kept thinking of over was my baby, my baby, my baby. I wanted to keep her so badly. I wanted I couldn't fathom the idea of being separated. And, at this point I was heading into second trimester. So some pretty strong feelings going on there.
Lots of hormones, I'm sure.
Lots of hormones. Yeah, so many. And the feeling just kept rising. And I thought, if I go now, we'll go together. And, maybe if I just end it, I won't have to make this choice. We'll be together forever and I won't have to worry about it anymore and it'll be fixed and everyone will be fine.
Sure, it sounds like an escape. Yeah.
Yeah. It did at the time. And so long story short, I nearly drove into oncoming traffic on the way home. And when I'd finally gotten insurance at this point, and when I told the doctor, she said, "I need you to see a psychiatrist." Anyone, I guess when you're pregnant, if you have suicidal thoughts or moments, they'll book you in for a session just to make sure things are okay. And I had told them about the whole situation. So that was the closest I got, thankfully. But it was a bit of a turning point for me. I realized that I didn't have the tools and the resources to deal with what was going on by myself. And I, it sucked, but I had to kind of take a step back and wonder what being a young mother would be like without those tools and resources, and the sleepless nights and the trying to be there for someone else who was fragile and small and needed me when I couldn't even be there for myself. And that was really the sort of the beginning and end of that realization. It took a little longer to sink in, I think, but that was when I made my first commitment, which was to get myself into therapy as soon as my daughter was born.
Wow, that's a big deal.
And I'm still, talk about failing motherhood. I think that was one of those moments where I thought, why did it take why did it take getting to this to make that decision for someone I love, to nearly ending 2 lives? It's just sad and awful and wrong that it happened that way. And I wish so much that there had been another moment where I could have said, this is what's going to happen. This is a good idea. This is a practical decision. But it just didn't happen that way. It needed a hell of a push to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. They talk about how each person needs their own rock bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, that was yours.
Yeah, apparently so. And after everything else I had dealt with, apparently I had further to fall. And
isn't that remarkable? Yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew?
So.
Hey, it's Danielle. Just a few years ago, my marriage was on the brink of collapse while I worked to survive never-ending power struggles with my strong-willed toddler. What was supposed to be my dream was becoming a nightmare of tantrums, stress, and yelling about shoes. I didn't like who I was becoming, and I knew how influential these early years were, yet every night at bedtime I felt guilty and hopeless. I even had a degree in early childhood education and a teaching certification. Talk about feeling like an imposter. If this is you right now, here's what's on my heart to tell you. Your desire for connected relationships is exactly the reason that you are a good mom. The right things are bothering you. Your dream of enjoying your child is not dashed even in a pandemic. There is hope for your marriage, for your toddler, and for your sanity. As a positive parenting coach, I'm committed to helping you overcome the overwhelm so that you can establish the foundation for a happy home life, feel like a team, and be able to get out the door without an epic meltdown. Theirs or yours. And there's nothing that lights me up more than celebrating my client wins. Going from fearing divorce to feeling like a team. Breaking through in new approaches and light bulb moments regarding your expectations. Eliminating aggression and straight up defiance. Feeling like they are proud of their parenting. This is all available for you too, and so much more. I'm so excited to be opening up the doors for my private one-on-one sanity and solutions system this month for families who are ready to stop winging it and feel empowered and prepared. My availability is really limited, so I only have space to take on 5 families. Honestly, you and your kids deserve this. You deserve to feel in control of your world when the rest of the world is falling apart. You deserve to feel like the go-to mom that others come to for advice. You deserve to take charge of your mental health while you are wiring your child's. And you deserve to invest in preventative measures so your family's story doesn't include a custody battle. Are you ready to change the trajectory of your family's future? If you know investing in your parenting will ensure your child's long-term success, I'd love to chat with you. You're invited to apply for a complimentary Sanity and Solutions call. I will have the link in the show notes to apply. I can't wait to meet you, hear about what's going on at your house, and see how I can help. I am on a mission to change the world by meeting kids' deepest needs by meeting their parents' deepest needs. And I believe in order to parent well, you need 5 S's. Sanity, so practical strategies to extend your patience and focus on your well-being as a parent. You need solutions, which are authentic, individualized, and effective parenting strategies that are going to work for your child and feel aligned for your family. You need to get on the same page, whereby writing your family business plan helps you zoom out and create the foundation for you and your parenting partner to feel like a team and have each other's back. You need secure relationships because the parent-child relationship is the template that wires our child's subconscious programming for the rest of their life, how they see themselves and how they see the world. And our relationship with them is the biggest key critical component of our influence on them over the long run. And the fifth S is support. I really do feel like you can have all of the best information in the whole wide world, but if you don't have the accountability and someone cheering you on and checking in with you, then it's not going to get to a place of implementation and troubleshooting and actually seeing the changes and results. So those 5 S's are what I work on with my one-on-one clients now. And it, again, it's sanity, solutions, same page, secure relationships, and support. I believe every single parent wants what's best for their kids and is doing the very best with what they have. I believe that there is no manual. We have to write our own. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. I believe that it's possible for you to gain the perspective and tools and confidence you need to feel like the expert of your child and live in real life as the parent that you thought you would be this whole time. I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that I'm rooting for you. I am the biggest cheerleader, literally. I know that I can help. I know that it's possible for your family, but you have to be ready and you have to be at that place where you know that you're taking parenting seriously and you're prioritizing it by carving out the time and carving out the resources to make it happen. And you may not be ready to do that. It is not for everyone. But if you are a mom who knows that at the end of this whole journey, your legacy that you leave by how you raise your kids and how you show up in these hard moments and the way that you spent these years matters a heck of a lot to you, and you know that you could do better with more tools, then I urge you and encourage you to ask yourself what you are choosing over that right now. Is it just the security of having extra money in the bank? Is it just having more downtime in your schedule? Is it not wanting to have a hard conversation with your partner about, considering this as an opportunity? Ask yourself what you're choosing, because if you're saying no to this, you're saying yes to something else. And I know that the you from 10 years down the road would not regret having to make this a priority. And I know that the best things that we do in life are the things that we have to just find the time and resources for. And when we do, we're so glad we did. So if you feel like this really, really does matter to you, and if you are ready to be at a place to make it a priority, then please, please, please don't wait any longer and schedule a call with me today. The link is in the show notes. And again, I cannot wait to hear from you and start this journey together. I am cheering you on. So I'm sure that's a huge driver for what you do now, is trying to prevent others from getting to that dark of a place.
Yeah, to some extent. I think getting that help, getting mental health support before you get to not even just crisis mode. I'd been in crisis mode the whole way through, but getting to a point where ending it does literally seem like the best possible decision. Mm-hmm. I'm really concerned about the stigma that surrounds suicidal depression and suicidal episodes, because people like me and people who have attempted suicide, either once or multiple times, it's really hard to talk about, especially to professionals, especially to people who don't understand what it's like, because there's immediate drawing back and horror, and you get, the people react very strongly to that. Yeah. And, I think it's one thing that I'm trying to do is help normalize that, because I cannot tell you, and this is kind of a not a sad story, but it may be a weird story. I met a girl who is a good friend of mine now, and through conversation, we figured out that we had both gone through similar experiences with suicidal depression. And just being able to talk to someone normally about the idea of self-harm and suicidal thoughts, and for her, it actually occurred more regularly than with me. So for her, it was even more a kind of normal in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, as sad as it was a gift to be able to exchange that with her, because there was no one else that I could have that kind of conversation with. So I think that's a huge part of something of, part of my passion for mental health support is not just getting the help you need, but connecting with the people who can have the conversations with you that you need at the time that you need them, and just normalize
huge.
that. Because we think about people in crisis, but we don't think about what happens 6 months, a year, 5, 10, 20 years later after an incident, after a depressive episode, after a suicidal episode. You don't know if this is something they deal with every day. You don't know if this is something they deal with on their birthdays, or because their mom died 10 years ago, or you don't understand what the situation is. So it is hard to support them in the way that they need. And mental health isn't something that just goes away. There's no magical cure for it. You can take medication to manage it. You can work on lifestyle changes. You can see counselors and therapists. You can go through specific treatment plans. And for some people that does work very well. And for others, and I'm one of them, it's a matter of managing. It's a matter of accepting mental health as another facet of your personality, and learning to embrace it to a certain extent, and to learn from it, but also to take care of yourself and prioritize yourself. And I was at a small retreat with a couple friends last weekend at this remote farmhouse, and one of the attendees told us about how her mom had this great saying, and she said, "I am a woman first before I'm a wife, and a wife before I am a mother." And she taught her daughter, the lady I went on the retreat with, the importance of putting her needs first, because what you saw then was this fantastic domino reaction, this ripple effect, where the children benefited from having a healthy mother who prioritized time for herself as well as time for them. And they also saw this great relationship because she also prioritized time with her partner as well, and that relationship. So I thought that's that's not something we tell women enough or talk about enough.
No.
And I think that's sad, because it doesn't mean you're being selfish. It means you're literally setting yourself up to be the best person you can be in this relationship. So
exactly,
I think about that a lot. It's been like this was 4 or 5 days ago, and I think about this constantly. And I'm gonna write it up above my desk, because I was just so struck by that. And I think that's something I strive for, and that's something that I hope that I'm, I guess, working towards as someone who has made the choice to place their child for adoption, in large part so that they could work on themselves. So I'm hoping that, someday maybe my daughter will at least partly understand that was the reason I made that decision. I hope to tell her myself, because we do have an open adoption, so I do get to see her in person a couple times a year, and we keep in touch. But
that is so special.
Yeah.
So let's circle back, because we got ahead of ourselves.
Sure.
Tell us more about your experience you had having your daughter then, and did you get to meet the couple then that adopted her, and how did that kind of all go down?
Yeah, so the adoptive couple that we chose was the second kind of situation, second couple who had come to our attention. We get this book of potential couples, and you look through them, and one thing that struck me was that the couples were usually a lot older, which makes sense, because if you think about it, the natural cycle of adoption, usually it's considered an option once fertility, and once you've gotten past can we have biological children, and maybe once you've gotten past fertility treatments are considered IVF. So this is often not kind of a last-ditch attempt. That sounds so horrible to say, because it's not the case, but it's often farther down the line of choices, shall we say. Not often people's first choice. And so there were a lot of older couples, and that just didn't really ring true to me. I didn't really like the idea of being so far apart from the adoptive couple in age and experience. I really wanted a couple that we could grow with, that we could learn from, but we could also be a part, we could be a part of their family. And so we ended up finding a couple kind of last minute, actually. They had just joined this agency, just signed up at this agency, I think a couple months back. They'd gone through, of course, the whole process of being qualified. But their profile had just gone up on the website, I think 6 or 8 weeks before, which is an insanely short turnaround time for adoption. And I saw them and I immediately thought, I want to get to know them, because they were less than 10 years older than us, which was very, very unusual. He ran his own business and worked from home, which I loved, because she would get kind of that entrepreneur background that we had been hoping that we would have given her. So it was kind of like, what is the life we would have wanted for her if we had decided to parent? Well, she would have had at least one parent working from home, and hopefully people who enjoyed traveling, people who would be able to give her different experiences, and the faith background that I talked about as well, and someone not too much older than us, so that we could connect with them on a personal level as well as relationally. And I also love that they had a biological family as well. This adoption was not a matter of not a choice related to fertility for them. It had been more of a faith-based, this is how we want to add to our family. This is what we want, partly a vocation, I guess you could say. And we really liked that too. So we love the thought that she has an older sister. We love the thought she would have kind of ready-made family there as well. So we ended up getting induced at the hospital because I was running a bit late on the due date. And, we had met the prospective adoptive family several times. And we had said, if things go well, this is, we absolutely choose you all. But it's really much in Illinois, you have 72 hours to change your mind about an adoption agreement and to finalize it. So basically, there's a 72-hour period after leaving the hospital for the birth parents, any birth parents on the birth certificate, to change their minds. So they basically had to wait that extra 72 hours after having taken her home for that final agreement to be reached. So, as I said, I was induced, and they got to come to the hospital a couple times. So the first time they met our daughter, and they spent some quality time with her. The hospital was fantastic, and they set aside some space for the adoptive family to meet our daughter, and they got to know her a little bit. They got to meet a couple of members of my family, a couple members of his family, my boyfriend's family, now husband. And it really was what I was hoping it would turn out to be for the most part. Unfortunately, some of family members could not make it. My mom was not there due to just extenuating circumstances with mental health and health issues. So she unfortunately missed out on that. But I guess it really went as well as you can expect. It was, it's still a bit of a blur sometimes even now, but I can remember sort of certain moments crystal clear. And we were in hospital for about 48 hours. So 48 hours to be a parent. Wow. And to do the first feedings and to watch her sleep. And we ended up having kind of this little ceremony in the chapel, which was really cute. They read some poems, and they talked to us about, the adoptive family talked to us about how excited they were. And this was all kind of the pregnancy counselor from the adoption agency kind of helped us put this together. And it was really, really sweet.
Wow.
But, when I got home, I didn't have the support system that I had been hoping for. So throughout the pregnancy, my boyfriend and I had been living apart for the most part, and my housing situation fell through, I think, about 6 weeks before the due date, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving in with my boyfriend and his roommate for the final period there, and that worked out. That ended up working out well. I think he was able to kind of be on hand and help when necessary, and he took me to the hospital and brought me back. And but my family was not involved. After their reaction, I didn't really want to talk to them or be around them, and there was a limit to what his family could do as well. So I just didn't really have anyone to talk about it. My friends didn't, they tried, and they were supportive, and they were fantastic, but they weren't physically there. So I didn't really have much of a in-person support system. What I did end up doing was meeting some ladies getting to know some ladies through a Facebook group, a mommy Facebook group. And I told them my story, and they welcomed me in, and they ended up sending me a care package.
Aww.
When I got home from the hospital, they sent me a bunch of like postpartum health and beauty products and chocolate, and it was really, really sweet. It was really sweet to have to come back to that, but
from like seemingly complete strangers.
Yes, from complete strangers. Sweet. It was so fantastic, and letters and notes, and it was really what I needed, because the adoptive family drove away, and I was just a mom without a baby, and I had the saggy stomach and stretch marks, and everything was painful, and I just wanted to sleep for forever. I don't know how you all do it, because I can't imagine coming home and then having to not take care of myself, take care of someone else.
Right.
So just yeah, it was hard.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, hard is the understatement of the podcast.
And then, when that 72-hour period was up, by this time, my boyfriend so the birth father has the option to sign away his rights to claim parenthood, essentially. So my boyfriend had done that before we went to the hospital. And part of me was a little hurt by that. I don't know why. I expected something different, but I guess kind of hoped that he would stick it out with me. But he went first, so to speak, and 72 hours after I got home, it was just me. He had gone to work, and our pregnancy counselor came with the adoptive family, had their own pregnancy counselor attached to them as well. So the two of them came and witnessed me signing my final rights away. And I think that was possibly the worst part of the whole thing was just being there and in an empty apartment and just sitting with that decision by myself. It was rough. Yeah. So
that has to be like soul wrenching.
It was. But I mean, I was also so tired. So tired. I just wanted to go back to sleep. But it was just kind of the final straw, final toll of the bell. That was the last part. And after that, I had to somehow figure out a way to accept it and carve out a life for myself and figure out what being a birth parent meant post-placement. And I mean, it's postpartum support for birth parents is not really something that exists to any great degree, unfortunately. I was very, very lucky through my pregnancy counselor. I got connected with possibly one of the only organizations still today that handles this. They're called the On Your Feet Foundation. And they work exclusively with birth parents post-placement. And they offer support, offer grants for things like anything from bus tickets to education to helping you get groceries while you're trying to find a job. And they help connect you to those resources. And 3 weeks after I signed my rights away as a parent, I went to their birth parent retreat, their annual birth parent retreat. And it was probably a little bit soon for me to try and kind of face all of those emotions, because the first couple months you're kind of just numb, to be honest, because you've got all of this shit happening to your body. Everything is readjusting. I think the doctors say it takes about a year, I think, after having a baby for things to kind of settle down. First couple months are just a little nuts, especially especially with a child. I can't imagine. But dealing with milk coming in and then not, and then all of the pain and all sorts of stuff drying up, and trying to just figure out who you are as a person again.
Yeah.
And then just kind of take in the enormity of not being a mom in the traditional sense, because your body is like, we just had a kid. Where's the kid? Where'd it go?
Right.
And the rest of you is like, I don't know what to tell you. We're just by ourselves. We're gotta figure this out somehow. So postpartum depression was definitely something I had to work through. And I can't speak for any other experience of PPD. I know it can be fatal. Well, really, in certain cases, and I know it can be long lasting and awful. But I had to kind of figure that out. It was so weird. Like, I wasn't even sure I got to have PPD if I didn't have a kid, because I thought kind of the whole point of it was I can't adjust to being a new parent.
Like the relationship piece.
Yeah, like like you're struggling with the relationship. You're struggling to be there for the child. Like, PPD to me seemed like it happened in relation to the baby. And to me, it happened in a relation to a lack of, and adjusting to that. So it was a very strange time. And in the middle of all this, I had to figure out what to do about work, because I had worked in a manual labor job until I was 8 months pregnant. And after that, I was like, well, this is obviously not going to work for much longer. And I'm not sure I can do this again afterwards, because it was pretty intensive. So I had to kind of figure my way through that next portion of my life, which actually brings me to the second commitment I made to myself when I was pregnant, which was to start my own business. And I actually got the paperwork right after signing the paperwork for the adoption. I got my certificate of business ownership that same week. So, and all of this stuff is coming up for me recently, because it's actually National Adoption Awareness Month in November.
Okay.
And I took a challenge to share some of my story on Instagram each day. So some of this stuff is coming up for me again. And I just found that picture of myself with my business ownership, with a little gold sticker and the signature at the bottom. And I looked really proud, but I looked also just so exhausted and just out of it, really. But it was hard to imagine then kind of what would happen next, and who I would become, and how I would live, how I would function again.
Yeah. So where did the idea for your business come from?
So I had wanted to focus on journalism in college. I had started on wanting to be a criminal investigator, and dropped that pretty quickly, moved on to journalism. And then I realized that I really enjoyed marketing. So I kind of went with that. I did a sort of a combination at university, and I ended up kind of finding my way into content marketing, which is, I guess, kind of a combination really of journalism and marketing. And you take a lot of those journalistic skills, but you apply them to companies and to supporting the content that they put out. So many, you see company blogs and company content like white papers and case studies and social media content and graphics and infographics. Companies put out a lot of content to tell people about what they do, to sell things, to tell their story. And so that was something I got really excited about. So that's kind of where where that started. And over time, kind of as I started my business, as I got to know the market a little bit more, I kind of narrowed it down to the topics that I was interested in. And they were very, very big topics like tech and finance. But I realized that I really enjoyed taking complex information and distilling it down into words and ideas and stories that a wider audience could appreciate and understand and relate to. So that's kind of where those topics came up for me. And now more recently, I'm taking on board more projects that are a bit more personal. So almost opening it back up in a way to topics and niches that mean more to me personally, and just supporting businesses that I care about, as well as businesses that need content.
Sure. Well, that makes total sense. That's a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So what has the last 4 years looked like then? Just cupcakes and rainbows, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day. And unicorns.
And unicorns, don't forget.
Unicorns. So I got myself into therapy. I found a therapist who had actually had experience in the adoption field. She had been basically an expectant mom counselor, pregnancy counselor. And so we really, I needed to, I had a lot to work through, obviously. There's the adoption, grief and loss. I deal with situational anxiety, and I had the suicidal depression. We had to figure that one out. And then, of course, the PTSD. But it was kind of, the thing with therapy is that you kind of have to treat what you see, kind of have to work with, the symptoms as they come up, and what your client is struggling with the most at the time. And for me, that was grief and loss, having just been through this just catalytic event. That was something that I had to kind of find my way through. So I ended up working with this therapist. I work with the same therapist after 4.5 years together.
Oh,
and
awesome.
we've kind of covered the spectrum. She's now almost, I think, a marriage counselor in some ways too. She got to know my husband pretty well over the course of those 4.5 years, and my family. I talked a lot about my birth family and how complicated that situation was. So I feel like I've come a long way. It's a process. It's a journey. It's something that, even today, well, especially this year, but even today, I realize that I still have blind spots. There are still triggers that I can't quite control. There are, earlier today, I had coffee a little bit too early, and I could feel the anxiety rising. because, that's what caffeine does. It causes, it spikes that adrenaline. And for people who struggle with anxiety, that can trigger a panic attack or an anxiety episode. So it's things like that. Like, these are basic things that you kind of have to learn and internalize, and you still don't get them right.
Yeah.
It could be even a few minutes off, and it's a constant process. So that's something that I'm consistently kind of trying to move towards. And after 4.5 years in business, I wish I could say that I was super successful at it, but I'm still working at that too. I'm definitely, leagues down the road from where I was. And I'm very happy about that. I'm for the first year or so, I was on food stamps and government health insurance and going to the food pantry once a month to get extra groceries. And I was very grateful for that support. Really, really needed it. But after a while, I was able to move forward from that. And today, my biggest kind of challenge is prioritizing myself, because that's one thing. You talk about it's really funny going into an industry that has the same exact problems as you did before you got there. So prioritizing yourself, self-care, mental health support, these are all things that I have gone through. And then I walked into an industry that's like, oh yeah, we are terrible at this. So it's sort of like having to relearn these things as I build a business as well. So
yeah,
this year, part of my challenge has been to step back, and which is like almost impossible to do when you're dealing with a pandemic and a recession and yeah. My husband also quit his full-time job in January, which you're like, perfect timing to go freelance. So I like,
no pressure.
No pressure. So I also became the sole earner this year. So that was fun.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, learning it's just this constant lesson of figuring out how to prioritize myself, again, woman before a wife before a mother, learning what that first one means. Like, what does it mean to put myself first as a woman, as a person, as someone who has these special needs and special kind of boundaries and parameters and weaknesses and challenges, and trying to figure out how to build a life and a business around those instead of struggling to fit my mental health issues into the business and life and career that I already have. Because I can tell you, it does not work very well that way. You kind of have to start by going backwards and saying, okay, well, this is who I am. This is what I've got to work with. This is just it. I mean, I can't do much about it. What do I need to function? And then that's where the business comes from, essentially. What do I need to function? And what is the minimum? I've had to ask myself this 1,000 times this year. What is the minimum I need to get what I need to done? And, that can mean, at different points this year and other years, that has meant working a few hours a day, 7 days a week. Other times it's meant taking 2 days off for mental health. Other times it's been not working with this particular client because it's too much, or it's the wrong fit. Yeah. So it's so funny to me how building a business can parallel the process of getting mental health support, because you're like, you have to go through all of these stages, all of the same stages. It's hilarious.
It's so true. I was just on a call this morning with like a mindset coach with like this group I'm in, and she was saying how entrepreneurship does bring out all of the things that you need to process through and deal with about your own identity and things that you haven't dealt with. And like, it just brings it all to the surface because it is just like so transparent. You can't not.
Yeah. Especially as a solo business owner, because you are the boss, you are the employee, you are the project manager, you are the HR department, you are the finance department, you are everything.
Social media coordinator. Yeah.
You're a social media coordinator, marketing guy. You're everything. And so if you can't come to work as a healthy person who is prioritizing themselves personally, then you're sort of shit out of luck, to be honest with you. You just, who you bring to work with you is what you have to work with. So like, it's, if you're personally feeling shitty, I can guarantee that professionally it's not going to be much better. You may be able to work on autopilot for a short amount of time, but it'll run out very quickly. I can always tell if I'm having a bad day. I'll have I can tell I have I'm on a timer. I'm on the clock. I have about maybe an hour left before the brain fog descends and I'm just unable to be productive. So you're like, well, you better use that time well.
Yeah.
It's all you've got.
Don't start scrolling somewhere because then you're done. Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners can take those parallels into motherhood as well, because that journey itself, as we grow with our kids, does create a lot of the same catalyst for change and growth that building a business does, because you're building a family, you're building your identity from scratch again, and you're trying to figure out who these little people are and what this whole parenting thing even is. And so much of it erodes everything that you thought you knew. Yeah. And you have to rebuild again. And it's a very painful process. It's really not fun. But when we accept it and when we kind of rise to that challenge and take the lessons as they come and try not to take it so personally and find a humility in it to say I have a willingness to learn, then it becomes transformational and it's beautiful. And we are able to become the people our kids do need. But it's not cupcakes and rainbows, and it's not, social media filter fancy, which is why I do want to show that transparent side of it here on this podcast. Yeah. And I think it's so important to hear other people's stories of what that looks like for them, because it's just never going to pan out the way that we thought it was going to be or think that it should be or any of those things.
Yeah.
So I'm so, so, so grateful for your honesty and your vulnerability and sharing what it looked like for you, because it is a perspective that we don't hear all of the time and we should be able to hear, but we really have to seek it out. And so being able to get in your shoes helps just so much just broaden our idea of what the motherhood experience can look like. And I would just love you to give you a soapbox to get on for a second of whatever you feel like either moms need to hear or that you have just learned and wish you knew sooner. What would you love to share?
Oh, wow. Well, I've been kind of saying it already, haven't I? With prioritizing yourself, prioritizing your mental health. I mean, please don't do what I did, I guess, is the overall thing. Not necessarily to do with the adoption decision, because that's a whole other personal decision that it is what it is. But in terms of mental health, I spent years without that proper support, and I really regret that. Who knows what my life, my family, my business would have looked like if I had gotten to that sooner. And so I really, really encourage you, especially as a mother, if you have a growing family, they need you to be healthy. They need you to be there and to be an example of someone who will stand up for themselves and who will take care of themselves, so that when they grow up, they'll do the same thing. And I didn't have that. I didn't have a mother who was willing to do that. She just kind of let go and let it all take her. And I had to live with that growing up. From the age of 8 or 9, I saw all of that happen, and I had to grow up very, very quickly and be an adult when my mother couldn't. And to this day, I almost feel like I didn't have parents at all. And I think that's such a terrible thing to leave a child with.
Oh, absolutely.
And your story, your situation is yours. And the personal choices you make are yours. And I'm not here to judge, and I'm not here to say, this is the only way it needs to happen, because clearly I had to hit several rock bottoms, multi-layered rock bottoms, to get to where I am. And sometimes that's how it needs to be. We need to be in a place to accept help.
Right.
To even begin. And that's fine. And And I just encourage you to, once you've got there, don't give up. Keep going. It may take, in fact, it definitely will take a while. And it'll take commitment. It'll take going to that therapist once or twice a week. It'll take taking time out for yourself so that you can cool down and let your thoughts go in a different direction. It'll take learning those triggers, learning those side effects if you struggle with mental health. It'll take admitting that you can't do this on your own and that your spouse or partner need to step up, your friends and support group. If you need them, hopefully they'll be there for you. But the overall point there is that you need to be there for yourself, even if no one else can be. And because sometimes that's all you've got. And if we don't have ourselves to support us, then where would we be?
Right.
It's like the last ditch effort there. It is. If we can't be there for ourselves, then that's all we have. So
it is all we have. But we're not taught that. That's not something that in school, it's so here's your perspective on the world and here's your relationship with yourself and here's how to nurture that. It's not even a thing. And then as an adult, you are reeling and realize oh yeah, I never keep my promises to myself. That's strange. And then you finally realize just how critical that is. And that's something that I'm coming around to really with my business and with my own personal mental health is I have to be able to count on myself. Mm-hmm. I have to be able to say I'm going to do something and then show up and do that for no one else but myself. Mm-hmm. And every time that I make a promise and I don't keep it, then I erode that trust in who I think I am and what I'm capable of. And who does that help? No not my kids, not my spouse.
Right.
No, it's all on me. And that's it's a weight of responsibility to kind of accept when you think that everyone around you are the ones that should be changing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's a pill to swallow. But that is when you're able to finally step into your power of what you have influence over. And you can kind of see how you can be an agent for change then in things that do feel very out of your control. So I love your perspective on that because that's something that I've really reckoned with myself in my own story. But I just think every mom can kind of take that in whatever that looks like for this stage of their life and hopefully find a challenge within those words. So I think you're incredibly well-spoken, wonderful at sharing very, very detailed, hard aspects of your journey. And I'm just so proud of where you're at right now. And that you're willing to share and that you're doing this advocacy work and you're sharing things on social media that I'm sure are very hard for you to do. So thank you for being that voice and for educating the rest of us and for just being willing to kind of be that person and share those intimate details of your story. And I just can't thank you enough for spending your time with us today on Failing Motherhood.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm very grateful that you were open to listening and that you appreciate the perspective. And I think that's really what sort of starts that change, starts those changes, is sharing those stories and is realizing that people who are so different from us, they may look similar, but they have very different stories, and they may look very different, but there's so many similarities, and you don't see that without sharing and without those stories. So it's great to be here and to be able to do that.
Well, thank you so much. We will we'll have to stay in touch.
Yes, let's do.
Okay. Wasn't that a treat, you guys? I hope you were just as honored as I was to hear Leanna's story. I hope you're inspired to ponder more ways that we can support postpartum birth mamas. Once again, as a reminder, click the link in the show notes or in my Instagram bio for sanity, solutions, get on the same page, securely attached relationships, and the support you need. It's all there for you when you choose to invest in yourself. 30-minute sessions are only available for a limited time, so if the link is still active, snag a time slot. The next episode will come sometime. Stay sane out there, y'all. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.